Hello, everybody. You're very welcome to our menopause and mental health webinar today with Mental Health Ireland. We're delighted to have you here today, and we're delighted to have so many of you joining us as well. We're just going to give it another few minutes just to allow some more participants to join in, and we'll start the webinar then very, very shortly. Hello, everyone. You're very welcome joining us today to our menopause and mental health webinar. Just go through a couple of housekeeping items with you today. Our program for the day is we're going to hear from some people who have some expertise in the area, have been working in the area. First of all, we're going to have a video address from Minister Mary Butler, Minister for Mental Health and Older People, and that'll just be a few minutes. Then we're going to hear from Nicola Wolf. Nicola is has an organisation called the Menopause Maze, and she supports people through their menopause through CBT and many other ways as well. Then we're going to hear from Noelle Tanner, who is an expert by experience, and Noelle is going to speak about her personal journey around menopause and its impact on her mental health. Then we're going to hear from Dr. Patricia Heavey. Patricia has produced a report, the first of its kind in Ireland, around women's thoughts on the menopause and what supports they have available to them. And she's also going to give us some information around nutrition and diet and how that can support women through the menopause as well. We're going to just take a short stretch break then, and then we'll come back and we'll have a question and answer session with the different panelists. Now, any questions that you do have, you can pop into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there, and we'll put them to the panelists throughout the webinar and at the end, as I said, in the question and answer session as well. For best viewing, I would suggest selecting speaker view on your screen so that you see the person who is speaking at the time. Our hashtag for the day is Menopause. So that's Mena, the Irish word for women, and pause, P-A-U-S-E. So if you are tweeting or sharing anything on social media, if you could use that hashtag. And obviously today is World Menopause Day as well, and that hashtag as well, World Menopause Day 2021. If you are tweeting about anything, if you could use that as well. So we're all, as I said, you're all very, very welcome to be here. Now, what I will say is, unfortunately, Dr. Vanessa Lacey of TENI, Transgender Equality Network Ireland, could be with us today, but we will try and organise a separate session down the road, hopefully with TENI, just to speak about the transgender person's experience of menopause as well. But unfortunately, we won't be able to hear from her today. At the end, we will be sharing the recording with you, and we will be sharing resources and other information, particularly about our panelists as well. That will be emailed to everybody who's attending as well today. So you will have that, and we are going to be sharing live on Facebook as well. The webinar is going to be recorded, but no attendees will be recorded. It will be just the panelists who will be speaking will be recorded. So you don't need to worry about that. And we aim to finish promptly at 3:30. And I hope that you all find it very, very interesting. and enjoyed. And as I said, Q&A at the bottom there, pop in any questions you have there. We'd be more than happy to put them to our panelists and to answer them if we can. So for now, we're going to just hear from Minister Mary Butler. She wasn't able to be with us in person today, unfortunately. Being a government minister, she is pretty busy, but she did send us a short video just to wish us luck, and we're going to play that for you now. So we hope you enjoy.
Hello, I am delighted to see this event being held and to add my voice to this discussion. Mental health is a priority for this government, and we must acknowledge that there can be gender-related differences between people's experiences of mental health and of mental health services. Many of the risk factors for experiencing mental health difficulties, poverty, violence, low social status, responsibility of care for others, fall disproportionately on women. These pressures manifest differently across life stages. For young women, pressure to look a certain way can impact their well-being. This has been linked to the development of eating disorders, depression, and anxiety. During menopause, 20% of women report significant caring responsibilities, which can place added stress and pressure on women during an already difficult and challenging time. For marginalised women, these challenges are particularly acute. We are expanding mental health services for women through the implementation of Sharing the Vision, a mental health policy for everyone. A specialist group has been established as part of the policy's National Implementation and Monitoring Committee to address the particular mental health needs of girls and women of all ages. I'm delighted also that we are working to extend primary care and specialist level supports. In particular, I'm supporting the significant expansion of perinatal and eating disorder services. In the area of eating disorders, the 3 existing ED teams will be completed by the end of the year, in addition to the establishment of 3 new teams. The development and expansion of these services will continue next year. The perinatal model of care has progressed significantly, with funding made available this year for the recruitment of outstanding staff. All 6 main hub sites are in operation, and all 13 spoke sites now have mental health midwives in place. It is a priority of this government to build on this work and to deliver a truly supportive and responsive mental health service that meets the needs of all individuals. Thank you all once again for attending and providing me with the opportunity to address this important issue. Events like this are so important to highlight and progress women's health issues in Ireland. Gorv Mahagut.
Thank you very much, Minister Butler. Welcome new initiatives being provided for mental health, particularly around women's mental health over the next while. And just also that the Minister for Health did announce a new approach to menopause care for women in Ireland. Excuse me, and menopause hubs will be opening up throughout Ireland over the next couple of years. And there's also a Women's Health Task Force, and you can find details on that on gov.ie Women's Health, and you can see up what they've been up to there within there as well. And I just also want to acknowledge we have some other people who are supporting us in our webinar today. We have Mary Cummins and Nolene Wills of Mental Health Ireland are supporting the Q&A and making sure everyone's microphones and videos stay on and off. And then we also have Margaret Keane of Midwest Dairies who is supporting us as well today. So you'll see those people on screen, but you won't hear from them today. You will just hear from myself and the other panelists as well. So now I'm just going to introduce our first panelist, and that's Nicola Wolf. Nicola has a background in nursing education and mental health, and she's a master's in mental health interventions. She is also trained as a life personal and executive coach, and has as a mental health and wellbeing coach as well. She has trained with the British Menopause Society and in the UK, so has some experience from that as well. But within the Menopause Maze, her own organisation provides one-to-one and group support to women who are experiencing the menopause. Nicola, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for coming along today.
Thanks for having me, Claire. It's great to be here.
Thank you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us about the menopause. So so if you want to take it away there.
Okay, thank you. I'll just share my slides. Okay, so I hope you can all see my slides now. And thank you again, Claire and Mental Health Ireland, for having me here today. I'm delighted to be part of this discussion. It's really important that we keep the conversation going. It certainly has been improving in the past year or two, but there's lots more to talk and learn about. So it's great to be here. It's especially important to talk about menopause, I think, because menopause has changed from being an end of life reality to a midlife situation. 100 years ago, women would have experienced menopause when they were about 57 years of age, but we would have died a couple of years later, about 59 or 60. Now we're experiencing menopause midlife, and we're living for 25 to 40 more years. And that's way too much time to not understand what's actually happening to us physically and mentally as a result of the hormones that are changing. So it's great to be involved in the discussion, and we all need to keep talking and learning as we go. So I'm just going to start by looking at some of the terms that are used to make sure we're all on the same page with regard to the terms we hear frequently discussed. And they are, to begin with, the term perimenopause, which is the time near to menopause. And it spans we're usually around the late 30s, early 40s on, and then you could last from 2 to 10 years. So it's quite a lot of time, really. And it's when you first experience symptoms through to when you are finally reaching menopause. And menopause itself is really only one day. And that's the day that it is 12 months since your last period. So it's literally only one day in time. And it happens around about 51 years of age. And when you've had no period for more than 1 year and 1 day, you're then postmenopausal. And we remain postmenopausal for the rest of our lives. Sorry, now my slides are not moving. Can you just bear with me? Apologies, for some reason it's not working. Now, apologies for that, it got stuck for some reason. So the issues that the hormones that are causing the changes for us are really key to the symptoms that we experience. And they are the main ones that I'm going to look at very, very briefly are those of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So the estrogens are many, that we don't just have one estrogen, and they are actively involved in the growth and development of female sexual characteristics and the reproductive process. But they're also very much, they also have an effect elsewhere in our body, as we have estrogen receptors throughout our body. So they affect our brain, our bone, liver, heart, and other tissues. And in fact, estrogen is a hormone in our body, but also acts as a neurotransmitter in the brain. It's very important and has a big impact on us during perimenopause and thereafter. Progesterone is often called a pregnancy hormone. It's linked with obviously maintaining pregnancies, but when it begins to reduce, it is linked with irregular periods, infertility, headaches or migraines, mood changes, including anxiety or depression, hot flushes, weight gain, fibroids, and endometriosis. And then testosterone, which is the other really important hormone that we often just associate with men, but actually as women, we produce 3 to 4 times more testosterone from our ovaries than we do estrogen. And it's a really important hormone to us. And that has a role in maintaining the repair of a woman's reproductive tissues, in the construction of bone mass, and also very much linked with our emotions. Reduced testosterone is linked with a reduction in the general quality of life that we can experience. It is linked with tiredness, depression, headaches, cognitive problems, reduced libido, osteoporosis, and loss of muscle mass and strength. And again, that's important for us as we age. Oh, I do apologize. I'm not quite sure why this is happening with my slides. Apologies now, we'll try again. So the symptoms that I'm going to look at are the physical symptoms very briefly. I can't go into these because I don't have enough time, unfortunately, but you can see that there are many and varied symptoms, and they can be different in terms of the severity, but it is fair to say that if any of these symptoms are quite substantial for a woman, they will all affect our mental health as well. And those that I've highlighted in red are the ones that we experience probably most frequently, and can cause considerable difficulty for women. But as I said, I can't go through those today. I'm going to specifically look at the hormones that impact our emotional and mental health and the symptoms we experience as a result of that. So the estrogen is often referred to as the master regulator of the female brain. There's a Dr. Lisa Mosconi who has looked at this very specifically, and she says that it's very challenging for the brain to have fluctuating hormones, fluctuating estrogen in particular, as it affects the limbic system. And this area is linked with our mood, concentration, anxiety, libido, fatigue, and motivation. Menopause reduces our brain energy levels. This leads to us often feeling that our memory is being affected, that we are experiencing brain fog. It's not cognitive decline. It's as a result of the fact that because of the lack of estrogen, our brain isn't able to use the glucose it needs to function. And this then often leaves us feeling literally like I'm losing my mind. I would hear from many women, and I would have felt it myself, that there's a kind of an experience of not recognizing yourself in those years and wondering what is happening and being quite frightened by it. And many women will think that perhaps they're beginning to dement, which is a very frightening thing to think about. So they will often say, I feel like I'm losing my mind. And I've also heard it expressed as being a fatigue of the soul, which is a very powerful statement, I think. The suicide rate as well for women in the midlife years increases, and this is very important to note. It's not purely to do with hormones, as we are the sandwich years really, where we are supporting perhaps adolescents who are also experiencing their own hormonal changes, and also older parents perhaps who need more care. So there can be an awful lot going on during those years, but it is important to note that suicide rate for women increases during these years. Then the possible symptoms that we experience as a result of this are anxiety is extremely common. We can feel very anxious. We can experience palpitations, which they're really not uncommon. And in fact, I would know many women who have chosen, for example, not to drive on the motorway anymore, that they no longer feel safe, that they feel quite anxious when they're doing that. Their lives can be quite limited by this feeling of anxiety, and they can avoid leaving home, for example. They can also experience panic attacks for the first time, and that can be very frightening for any woman. Any person to experience panic attacks can be quite frightening. And there's also this low mood or depression of menopause, when the woman may previously never have had any experience of depression, but begins to feel quite low and flat in mood, with a reduction in joy in her life. The woman can also feel very irritable and feel really quite filled with rage at times, and not recognize herself in that again. And that can be very frightening. And in the next moment, feel quite sad and tearful. There's also a very commonly experienced symptom of brain fog and difficulty concentrating. And as I said earlier, that this could mean that the woman might feel she is actually beginning to experience dementia. And one of the most common symptoms for women going through perimenopause is insomnia. And this impacts our physical and mental health. We'd all believe that if we get a good night's sleep, we can manage anything. But insomnia is really, really common in the perimenopausal woman. I would really suggest that radical self-care is needed as we age, and we should be looking at this before we become perimenopausal, so that we are prepared to make adjustments in our lifestyle to optimize our health and support our hormones during these years. So you could look at taking a variety of different supplements, and obviously if you are taking other medication, you would want to discuss this with your GP, but there is a role for supplements such as phytoestrogens, vitamins and minerals, etc., in supporting our physical and mental health and our hormone health during these years. There's certainly steps to take with regard to diet that my colleague, Dr. Patricia Heavey, will talk about later. But we should look at the key things like cutting out or reducing alcohol, perhaps cutting out smoking, and looking closely at exercise. And I will talk about that now briefly as well. And back again to sleep. Try to prioritize your sleep and optimize the time that you go to bed and your room, etc., so that it optimizes the chance of you getting a good night's sleep. Medication, of course, can be used, and that can be both hormone replacement therapy or non-hormone replacement therapy medications. You should go and see your GP to discuss this. You don't have to take hormone replacement therapy. It is your choice, but definitely there is a role to play for hormones when we are feeling quite overwhelmed with perimenopausal symptoms, but also with regard to supporting our health as we age, as the impact of estrogen and testosterone as we age will be felt in terms of osteoporosis, etc. Also, if you're on other medication, have it reviewed before you begin any further medication, because sometimes the fact that we've been on medication for a while, whatever that is, that can change in terms of its impact on us during our middle years, because our metabolization of the medication is changing as well. And that could explain some of the symptoms you're experiencing. So there's some strategies that I would suggest are things like prioritizing your own health and well-being. Go have a general health check with your GP. Consider your social contacts, and perhaps inject times during your week to make contact with other people, because this is really good for us. If our mental health is affected by our experience of perimenopause, we can tend to withdraw from people, but actually reaching out to people and talking about our experience is really important. Try to engage in new learning, as that will, set down new neural pathways and does try somewhat protect us in terms of the risk of dementia. And look at the stresses in your life and see if you can control some of those. In terms of exercise, it certainly has a role in promoting mental health and well-being. And the 4 pillars I would really focus you on are balance, flexibility, aerobic and resistance exercises. And then also look at engaging in pleasant activities each day. Perhaps look at specific things like gratitude practices, where you make a note of very positive things you've experienced in your day, engaging in some meditation and mindfulness, and certainly looking at being more self-compassionate. We're often more supportive and compassionate of our friends and colleagues than we would be of ourselves. So we should try to be more self-compassionate. Also identify anxious thinkings and looking at ways of trying to understand the way we're thinking and how it is influencing our emotions and our behavior. It certainly has a role to play. Cognitive behavioral therapy has been found to help with the impact of hot flushes for a woman. It doesn't reduce their occurrence, but it certainly impacts the quality of, or how much they impact your quality of life. So if you take time to identify the problem you're experiencing, what your options are and making a list about those, what helped in the past and making a list of those, and who can help. What resources do you have? What friends, what family, what support you can get at work, and look at the pros and cons of each option, and then maybe make an action plan as to what seems best. This is a useful first step to take. I would just emphasize the fact that I really believe that we need to be informed as to the impact of our changing hormones so that we can take steps to promote our own health, and that radical self-care is really required as we age. Our health in this stage of our life is directly linked with our health as we age. So I would really encourage you all to think about how you might be able to do this as you proceed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was so interesting, and I love the idea of radical self-care. That we need to be, the idea that we need to be radical to implement our self-care seems like it shouldn't go together, but unfortunately, as women, for many women anyway, that they have to actually feel as though it is radical for them. And I was interested in what you were saying there about sleep and how many women it can affect.
Yes.
For myself, the hot flushes and things like that, and the jumpy legs, would affect my sleep. And I would have been a great sleeper, and I find now that my sleep is constantly broken throughout the night. And can CBT or some of the supplements, do you think that they good for helping women with those symptoms?
Well, I think start even before that and look at, well, what's your pattern, what's your behavior when you get to bedtime? Are you spending time on screens? Because the blue light will definitely upset our melatonin levels. And bear in mind that melatonin is really important. It helps us get sleepy and go to sleep and stay asleep, but it also drops during perimenopause and menopause. So we have both estrogen and melatonin falling. And as a result, then during the middle of the night when cortisol rises naturally, that wakes us up. And when we're more wakeful, we feel the night sweats happening, and they keep us awake. So look at your room. Is it around 18 degrees in temperature? Keep it cool. Perhaps if you're sharing the bed with somebody, use 2 different covers so that you can uncover yourself and not disturb the other person. Think of the quality of your bed linen. Is your bed comfortable? All of those things, like the very basic things, cutting out caffeine for a number of hours beforehand, not exercising too close before you're going to bed. All of those things contribute to you having a more positive sleep. And the one thing I would say that if you cannot get to sleep within the first 15 minutes of going to bed, you should get up and leave your bed. That's really difficult to do. We don't want to do it because we're exhausted. But if you get out of the bed and go and sit somewhere quietly, comfortably, then your brain will begin to recognize that the bed is not for anything else but sleep. Whereas if you lie in the bed tossing and turning, within the space of a couple of nights, your brain begins to associate the bed is for not sleeping. So you should actually really, try to be very disciplined in leaving the bed if you're not sleeping, and then return to it when you feel sleepy again.
Yeah, and I would struggle with that. I have other strategies that I used to try, but it's a case of that I want to stay in the bed, regardless, because I am so tired and everything else. But maybe I will try that the next time. I think we all come up with different strategies, individually ourselves that we might read about or find out about online or something like that. We're going to hear more about that in a little while. But Nicola, thank you so much, and we'll have you back in a little while where there's a couple of questions that come in, and we can put those to you when we have the panelist Q&A at the end. So thank you so much, Nicola. I really appreciate that. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you.
And now we're going to have up the lovely Noel Tanner. Noel is going to speak to us today as an expert by experience. Noel is a recovery education facilitator with Midwest Aries. You're very welcome, Noel. Within her role, she delivers recovery education workshops on topics such as anxiety, depression, and resilience. And she brings her lived experience to her work, and she's going to bring her lived experience to this topic today of menopause. Noel, you're very welcome, and if you want to take it away there.
Thanks so much, Claire, and Claire and the rest of the panel. Thanks so much for inviting me, because it is such an important topic. And just listening to Nicola, I was like, oh God, I related so much to what she was saying, you know. So I'm just going to give you my story, and I suppose everyone's experience is different, so I can only relate what I went through. I suppose my journey with menopause is one of reflection and learning, and being a panel member today has helped me to do this, and even to just think back of my journey myself. And for me, reflecting on something that occurred in my life helps me to grow and to give some understanding to where I was at that moment in my time, and maybe, take away the guilt I felt or judgments I made of myself, and learning from the experience. And I think as I've gotten older, I find reflecting back on things helps me learn from those experiences more. So I suppose reflecting back on my menopause journey, it started in my 30s. My menstrual cycle became irregular and I didn't know what was happening. I still got all the symptoms of a menstrual cycle each month, but without actually getting my period. I felt very confused and frustrated, and I felt anxious, and I had a lot of mood swings, which others around me would say, oh, is it the time of the month? And that would only annoy me more, because, women go through their menstrual cycle each month, and a lot of the time everything is put down to this. So women don't speak up or ask questions. And I suppose it was accepted as part of something that you were going through. But I can remember I felt very confused about what was happening to my body. And I asked my doctor, was I going through the menopause? But I was told, no, I wasn't, because of my age, that I was too young to be going through it. So I accepted that. So the following few years, I suppose, I changed, and I had no reason, I had no idea why. And I felt I was changing in some ways, but unsure of why. If this wasn't if I wasn't going through my menopausal transition, then well, what was it? And this affected my mental health, as I suppose I doubted myself. And I'll be honest, I nearly thought I was imagining, the symptoms I was having at the time. And I really did doubt everything I was feeling. And I suppose thinking back at that time, I was also wanted to be a mum, but thought that wasn't going to happen for me, as my menstrual cycle was so up and down. And I just accepted that it wasn't meant to be for me. But at age 37, I became a mum, which I couldn't believe, and I was over the moon with. I thought if I was going through the perimenopause that you couldn't get pregnant. So it was unexpected, but a great surprise for me. And while I'm grateful for that, I do understand that this is not always the case for everyone. And I suppose my menstrual cycle stopped fully in my early 40s, but I continued to feel tired and anxious, and I still got pains every month and soreness in my back. And going back to what Nicola said, the sleep thing was, I couldn't sleep at night, and I just couldn't understand it. And you get very irritable if you don't get your sleep, like it just knocks you out for the day. It has a huge effect on you. And I felt so confused, and I was still told it was not the menopause. And I felt like I was fighting with myself, that my body was telling me one thing, but that my mind was telling me something else. And I felt I was going mad, being honest, I really did. But as we all do in life, you just get on with things, and you just get up and get on with things. And I suppose I only really, truly found out that I had gone through the menopause 2 years ago, when I had to have an operation. I had to ask the doctor, have I gone through it, and we were laughing about, which wasn't funny really when I think about it, that I still doubted it, I still don't sleep great. Some nights I get restless legs and cramps, and I'm hot one minute and cold the next, but I am finding it's happening less and less. And just one thing I just think about that helped me was I had a small fan that I put on my locker that would face my legs. And when I was getting really hot in that, it actually did help. You know, it helped. Don't know, it mightn't help for everyone now, but that was just something that did help me at the time. And I still do it now. If I get hot like that, I'll bring out the fan. And I suppose reflecting back on how I was through this time, I can see that I had become very emotional and a sensitive person. And I became very anxious and worried about a lot of things. I doubted myself and my abilities and questioned everything I did. And I had those high and lows that Nicola was talking about. But then you just took the good with the bad. And you know, when you're going through something, it can be difficult to acknowledge or see what it is and see what's going on. And not just for yourself, but for those around you, I suppose. And we don't tend to have those conversations with our loved ones, as we might feel they would not understand, because being honest, we sometimes don't understand what's going on for ourselves. So how can we explain it to others? And lately, I just had this conversation with my son, explaining to him, we're out for dinner one night and we just had this just really deep conversation, and it just came up just, you know, out of the blue. And I just felt it was a good time to talk to him about it. And I explained to him what I was going through back then, and why I was emotional or frustrated or tired, or why I reacted the way I did to certain things myself, and maybe or overreacted, and I know for sure I was definitely overprotective at times. But this helped him in understanding me, not just as a person but as a woman and a mom. And he was very empathetic and had, you know, really understood what I was saying. And, you know, he was grateful that I had explained it to him. And I think that was really important. And it even connected us more, if that made sense. And I feel this is part of the learning, and that we need to explain to those around us what is happening to us, or so that we can gain an understanding of what we're going through, and that they can get an understanding, and maybe they can empathize maybe more and not react in a negative way. And there is a need for a more open and honest discussion around topics such as menopause. It's not taboo, and it affects 50% of the population. And I realize even I've not had that conversation with some of my friends, and asked them what it was like for them, or have they gone through it, or if they are going through it. And I'd not thought about that until now, really. And even, I suppose, a few weeks ago when Claire invited me to come on the panel, and we had a discussion about menopause, and I was telling Claire my story, and I said at the end I felt like a fraud as for being on the panel and telling my story, because I know other people have gone through, or are going through, like maybe worse symptoms, or worse experience than me, and like the constant hot flushes, and especially in the workplace, and how difficult it must be to manage, and people's stories of using HRT, hormone replacement therapy, to help them manage their symptoms. And I felt my story was not as difficult as others, but I had to stop myself thinking like this, and appreciate that my story was my experience, and what I went through was difficult. And it made me feel that as women, we judge ourselves and feel that, you know, others find things more difficult than we do to deal with at times, and so we devalue our own experience. So I had to stop myself doing that, and I think we all need to stop doing that, because it's so easy for us to feel like that at times. And I feel we need to change the narrative and acknowledge our individual experience, and commend ourselves for getting through it, managing it, and give ourselves a big pat in the back, because we all know menopause is difficult. And it should be supported, acknowledged, and educated about in all areas of our life. So even looking back at how I managed my symptoms, I realized how much being outside and doing things outside helped me with my mental health. I joined my local tennis club, and I played 3 times a week, and I walked every day. And I also enjoyed gardening in good weather. And in the winter months, I would play board games and jigsaws with my son. And as Nicola said, trying to get enough sleep is really important, you know, so trying to manage that and see what works for you around that. I suppose I came to accept myself and the changes to my body. And this has taken me a long time to do this. But once I stopped caring what other people thought of me and accepted myself, flaws and all, I discovered that I'm okay. I do my best, and I acknowledge the times I feel low and sad. And sometimes I just need to sit with it and know that life has its ups and downs and that tomorrow is another day. And I started writing a gratitude journal, and I still do this every day. And I list 3 things that I'm grateful for each day. And while this can be easy to do on a good day, on a low day, or if you're having a bad day, it lets me see that there are good moments even in each day, even in challenging times. And I think that's really important to learn for yourself. I now have a sense of freedom, and maybe it's because I'm over the 50 mark in my life, but I'm okay with me, and I've accepted myself, and I have a better understanding of who I am and what is important to me in my life. And I know that I am enough. And I suppose we're all different and have our own unique experience with menopause, but having these open discussions and honesty around it can affect us, how it can affect us in our mental health, is a start to supporting each other and learning from one another. And I suppose sharing the knowledge and resources we have to remove the stigma around menopause is important. So I'm going to finish with this quote that I saw online, and I think it's really apt. Amazing women don't have hot flashes. We have power surges. So that's the end of my
I love it, Doyle. Yeah, power surges. I definitely, when I think about that tonight, I have my power surges in bed. Just want to give you just one of our attendees just said was in tears listening to her because she feels maybe she's not going mad after all. And definitely, you know, even what you were saying about you know, being able to share with other people and that understanding that you needed for yourself. You know, that journey must have been very hard, thinking that, like, am I going mad? What is going on with me? That must be very hard for you.
It is. And I think at that age even as well, you know, you're still young. You know what I mean? I was very young when I think about it, going through it. But, you know, you do, when you're in the moment going through something, because you can't understand it, then it's very difficult to step outside and look in on that. And it's only as I've gotten older that I can appreciate that and look back. And I think what Nicola said is really important is, I've written it here, radical self-care. I quite like owning that, but it's taking your own steps of what works for you, because what works for one person might work for the other. And just acknowledging that this is okay, this is something I'm going through, and I will get through this, and you will get through it. You know, yeah. It's different for everyone, but you will get through, and just remember that, and you're doing your best. And I think that's really important. Not be self-compassionate. You both said that, and we're always harder on ourselves than anyone could ever be. Our own inner critic will always be there away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just looking there, just I look it up, 1 in every 100 women approximately under the age of 40 start experiencing perimenopause. And as you said, that is quite young. And, you know, as in, you know, today's society, so many women are choosing to have children later, because of career and so many other things that can be going on for women, even just being able to afford to be able to have a home, you know, to have their own home and things like that can really, really affect that. So, you know, sharing your story there about that difficulty that you had. Thank you so much. Your story is very, very powerful. But I love that you have found such positive changes in your life. You explained to us almost your radical self-care, things you're going to look after yourself. But one thing that really resonated with me was that conversation you had with your son in terms of explaining to him, you know, this is why this was happening. And you think, you know, because it's about women, the menopause affecting women, but, you know, there is that ripple effect of the effect it has on the people that we love around us as well. So when she was brought into this conversation, do you think?
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Like, I wouldn't have told him at the time because he was too young, whereas he was more ready for it now. But I do think it's really important to have that conversation, if you can, with your partner, your husband, your sister, whoever is there with you, the people that you live with day to day, because, you know, it can cause problems in relationships as well. And there's one thing we have to mention, you know what I mean? So I think if you put it out on the table, state it for what it is and say, well, look, this is what it is, this is what I'm going through, learn about it, inform yourself about it so you can understand what I'm going through. You know, there is something to be said in that. And I do think having that openness is really important.
Yeah, and hopefully having webinars like this, there's a lot of conversation on menopause now, and having World Menopause Day, you know, we'll start getting, you know, that information out there so women can start finding out what the hell is going on, what can I do about it for myself, and what can the people who support me in my life, what can they do as well. And, you know, because I think sometimes when we don't have the language, and we don't understand, we don't have the language, how can we explain? You know, if I don't understand something myself, how can I explain to anybody else? But another. So, you know, hearing you tell your story, just that very personal perspective, you know, it was really, really powerful. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really do appreciate you coming on today. And we're going to get you back again a little bit later. But just, you know, comments there, your story has really resonated with people. So thank you so much. We'll see you in a little while.
Thanks so much, Claire.
So now we're going to go from the personal to the academic almost, because we're now going to go to Dr. Patricia Levy. Hello, Trish, how are you?
Hello, Claire.
Trish is the SHE Nutrition and Health Group in Athlone Institute of Technology. She is one of the leads in that group. Your research team aim to explore the role of nutrition and health, well-being and disease, with a particular emphasis on the nutritional needs and challenges of women throughout the lifespan, including the menopausal transition period. You're a registered health promotion practitioner as well, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, Tricia. So take it away there.
Thanks so much, Claire. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for inviting me as well to today to speak. It's lovely to be here. And thank you to our previous speakers. They were absolutely amazing. I was hugely inspired, Noelle, from your talk, and Nicola, so informative as well. So as Claire said, I'm here today to talk about the nutrition side. And I'm also just going to talk a little bit about a report that we published earlier this year. As Nicola pointed to with regards to the menopause, it's really something that's a transition for women. Average age is 51, and you can go through symptoms 4 years before and then for several years after, but it's such a unique experience for everyone that, you know, every woman has a very different experience. And as Nicola also pointed out, we have a wide range of symptoms that women can experience, and these can also be then experienced also at different levels of severity. So we have the typical types of menopausal symptoms, vasomotor symptoms, which are your hot flushes and night sweats, but that can also even be things like formication, which is this crawling feeling under the skin. Lots of women also experience urogenital symptoms, neuromuscular symptoms, psychological symptoms, and then other reported symptoms like body shape changes, palpitations, hair loss. So a lot of this can be going on, and it can be quite an unknown time for women, and not sure exactly what is what, especially when women tend to just really kind of focus in on the vasomotor symptoms and don't realize that all of these other symptoms can actually be related to the menopause. So we actually know very little about the menopausal experience of women in Ireland. So this was something we wanted to do ourselves to actually investigate this. So earlier this year, we did an online survey, and over 855 women completed the survey. And they were from all different stages of the menopause, perimenopause, symptomatic postmenopause, and then those without symptoms after the menopause as well. What we did find, though, was that 78% of women indicated that menopausal symptoms interfered sometimes or often in their daily activities. And when we asked women about the symptoms that they were experiencing, 59% of women experienced 13 or more symptoms, which is quite a lot. You know, all those symptoms that we had on the chart before, some women were experiencing up to 13 of those. But the most commonly reported symptoms were the hot flushes, affecting 92% of women, low sex drive affecting 89% of women, and night sweats also affecting a huge percentage as well. And when we asked women about HRT use, only about a third of women are using HRT. And, you know, when we asked them, you know, why you weren't using HRT, for most women, it was something that they just didn't consider. They just didn't think it was something that that would be suitable for them. A lot of women are using alternative herbal remedies, being the most popular. Black cohosh was the one that came out as being most popular there, about 38% of women using that. Women also reported very much so that their body shapes change during menopause. And it's not something I'm going to focus on too much today, but we do see during this time that women find that they might not necessarily put on weight, but where the weight is going changes, and they tend to find that the weight goes on around the middle of the body. And this is to do with those hormonal changes. As we go through the menopause, estrogen levels start to decline, and estrogen used to keep keep that weight around the reproductive area, because estrogen's to do with the sex hormones, it's a sex hormone. But when that starts to decline, that estrogen goes down, and now that weight starts to drift upwards around the middle. So for a lot of women, that can be quite difficult coming to terms with that weight change. But what we did see, though, was that a lot of women are still very active, and the most common exercise is walking. What's really, really interesting, though, is that the majority of women, 77%, felt that they lacked knowledge and were unprepared for menopause. So this speaks volumes to us. I'm just so delighted that we're having these conversations and that women are engaging and starting to get educated and be provided with resources and support around menopause. But when we did ask them where they do get their information from, the majority said that most information comes from social media. Only around 21% are getting their information through their GPs. And this is something then we also saw, was that when we asked women, did they speak to other women or family members, only about 10% of women actually, spoke to other females or women or friends or family or partners around their menopause experience. And this can make, obviously, for a very lonely journey. So it's important that we start to try to address that as well. So I'm going to focus a little bit on menopause and health, especially with regards to diet and nutrition. And because this is a mental health webinar, I'm going to look at maybe diet and mental health and mood and menopause. But it's important to recognize there's a huge amount of change happening with hormones, but there's also an awful lot going on at this time as well for women. Children can be leaving home, we can still be looking after children at home. There can be changes at work, can start caring for parents and relatives. So there can be an awful lot of other things happening in your life at this time. And then also women can start to feel differently about their body. This, for some women, it can be quite, it can be quite negative, because their body shape can be changing and they're coming to terms with their body changing during this time. But for other women, it's actually quite positive, because they feel that their bodies have done so much for them, and they start to appreciate their bodies and what they have achieved, and that now is the time to look after their health, and especially as they go into older age. So it's a different starting point for everyone. So like I said, I'm going to focus a little bit on menopause, mood and mental health. And again, we keep coming back to estrogen and that hormone that's decreasing as we go through the menopause. And estrogen, it's involved in so many different things in the body, but also it's involved with the brain and neurotransmitters. So estrogen itself affects the neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters are basically these little chemical messengers in the brain, and they send messages throughout all the body, and estrogen is important in that whole operation. Estrogen is also linked to making of serotonin, and serotonin is also referred to as that happy hormone. So, estrogen very much involved here. And as we go through perimenopause, our estrogen levels are fluctuating during this time, so they're going up and down. So women can experience different things like mood swings, anxiety and insomnia, and difficulties with memory and concentration. And then as we become postmenopausal, those estrogen levels start to decline, and that can also have an impact here as well. So there's a lot of factors at play, and we need to be aware of that. Diet can maybe help for some women, not for everyone, or it could maybe complement some other types of say pharmacological interventions or different ways. So what I'm going to look at is very much from a whole diet perspective, and just realize the importance of a healthy, varied diet here. And protein is super, super important. And this is something that's really very much involved in making that serotonin. So protein, it's made up of chains of amino acids. And one of those amino acids is called tryptophan. And tryptophan is needed to make that happy hormone serotonin. It's also needed for making other neurotransmitters that are involved in the mood and brain function as well. So the foods that are really rich in tryptophan are lots of different varieties of protein-rich foods: your meats, your chicken, beef, pork, your fish, your soybean seeds, oats, bananas, eggs, milk, and dairy. So again, tryptophan's found in a range of foods. And for an Irish population, we do tend to eat quite enough protein, but for a lot of us, we actually tend to concentrate it in maybe one or maybe sometimes 2 meals a day. What we really should be trying to do, especially around this time, is maybe getting protein into all of our meals so that we're getting this constant supply of protein, and also maybe to start incorporating it into your snacks as well. So it's just thinking a little bit differently about your meals and the makeup of your meals. We're also very aware that when we come to the neurotransmitters and that serotonin, we think straight away it's to do with the brain. But the fact is, the majority of those neurotransmitters and serotonin is actually made in your gut. So in your large intestine, there's trillions of bacteria down there, and those boys are involved in converting and using tryptophan and other ingredients to make those neurotransmitters and serotonin. And we know this because you know yourselves, when you're nervous or you're excited, the first place you feel it is down there in your gut. So there's a lot of communication happening between our gut and our brains. So the gut is really important for making a lot of these neurotransmitters. So those bacteria that live down in the gut, they have to be fed. They need a food source themselves. And the food that they like best are these complex carbohydrates and fibers. And they help the gut bacteria to produce and release those neurotransmitters that are important for mental health. And the best way to achieve this is to have a diet rich in plant foods such as fruits, veg, and whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds. I'm just going to quickly talk about sleep. This is Penny, a pup that came into our house a couple of weeks ago. She has absolutely no problem sleeping, but for lots of us going through perimenopause and into menopause, it can be a challenge. And again, estrogen comes into play here. Estrogen decline can lead to hot flushes and night sweats, and it can disturb sleep. So we have this cycle that it can occur. And we also see for a lot of women, they have restless leg syndromes, which makes you want to move your legs, that'll keep you awake. And also with those urogenital changes, you might need to use the bathroom more often. So again, breaking that sleep cycle. And then because of what's going on, you might be experiencing more anxiety. That makes sleep harder. And all of this then intertwines, as Nicola said, and tiredness can exacerbate mood and anxiety. And over the long term, over the short term, that's not a problem. Things can be fine over the short term. Your body recuperates and bounces back. But over the long term, that can have a negative effect on blood pressure and other aspects of health. And it also can impact on our appetite, and we can be drawn to more calorie-rich foods. So can we actually use food to help us sleep better? For some people, this could be something that they could look at. Serotonin, that happy hormone, is great, is really important for sleep. So we know what we need to include serotonin in our diet. And we also use food to help us produce melatonin, which controls that sleep-wake cycle. So we just have up here just a list of all the different nutrients from foods that can help us make that melatonin, and things like foods that are rich in magnesium, and we can see all the range of foods there. And then also what's really important is B6, calcium, and zinc. Those guys are also important in making and regulating melatonin. So also found in a wide range of foods. Vitamin D, surprisingly, has also been shown to be really important in sleep. We should all be taking vitamin D supplements, especially during between Halloween and Paddy's Day in Ireland, because we're not making enough vitamin D ourselves from the sun. So we need that supplement for our bone health, also really important during menopause. But again, it seems that that can also be very beneficial with regards to sleep. So I know I'm over my time there, Claire. Thank you so much. I will stop.
That's absolutely fine, Tricia. I mean, it was all so interesting. And it's great to know that like there are things that we can do with our diet, that can support us as well. So, using that radical self-care phrase that, and the way Noelle spoke as well about how her self-care has really helped her. So it's good to know that there are things that we can do to support ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what's so great is that autonomy and to feel that you're taking control and empowering yourself. Not everything will work for everybody, but it's to try things out. And I think that's why it's important to have these conversations and to feel that support network with people. There's something great about that. And I think that's going to be hugely beneficial if we start having those conversations too.
Absolutely. And we just had one question there, and I don't know if you would be able to answer it, but if the perimenopause does start early, you know, does it last the same at the time, or would it go on, just say if someone did start it in their late 30s, you know, is it going to continue on into the 50s? Or, you
Yeah.
know, is there a standard length of time or not?
No, it's never straightforward when it comes to this whole cycle. For some women, of course, they might start to go through menopause earlier, but for most women, if you're going through perimenopause in your late 30s, early 40s, it'll probably still be around the 51 mark when you go through menopause, and then you're postmenopausal the day after that.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely, you know, that I've been learning as we've been preparing for this in terms of, you know, between perimenopause, menopause, because I just thought about menopause, you know, and so, and I've learned now that I'm actually gone beyond all those adjectives. Now I'm in a whole other, but like that, it doesn't mean that, like, you know, I still get hot flushes, you know, I still have other symptoms, even though, like, if we use those terms, I may be gone beyond that.
Yeah.
So is that common that these would continue beyond, say, when you're postmenopausal?
Yeah, so menopause is when you haven't had a period in a year, and then you're postmenopausal. And a lot of women can still go through symptoms up to 4 or 5 years postmenopause. But again, that will be individual. Some women won't, and others they might still experience some, but they might be not so severe, or some mightn't be as experienced. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you so much, Tricia. And we'll get you back in a few minutes we could have some more questions for you. So everybody, that was our individual panelists just giving their individual perspectives and the information that they have to share with us around menopause and mental health. We're going to just take a quick 5-minute stretch break so people can run to the loo, maybe get a glass of water or a cup of tea, whatever it is, or stretch the leg. And when we come back, we'll have all our panelists and we'll put the questions you've already put into the questions and answers to them. And obviously you can put in some more there if you like as well. So we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Hi everybody, you're very welcome back, and I'm just going to invite our panelists, Trisha, Noel and Nicola, to come back on at me now, and we have a couple of questions. We can have just a little chat about menopause and mental health. And I don't think we're going to have enough time to cover everything that, because it's actually quite a vast area. It has such a huge impact on people, on women's mental, physical health, social life, social health and everything else. So, there's quite a lot to do. So I think we'll have to do another webinar at some other stage to maybe focus in on some of those aspects. But for now, we'll just talk about it in general terms. Anyway, thank you all so much. A couple of questions have come in there. So I'll just start with which one lady I had mentioned that UTIs, urinary tract infections, have been a huge issue for her and her quality of life. So have anybody any suggestions, or is that tied to menopause or anything else that lady can do for herself?
Yeah, it certainly is a very common symptom in perimenopause and can actually get worse. Unfortunately, it's one of the genitourinary syndrome symptoms. And those symptoms tend to be in the cluster of symptoms that actually can continue to progress as we age, and they can be really very debilitating. So I would advise that the lady concerned speaks to her GP about the possibility, if she isn't on HRT, maybe that might be an option for her to consider, but if not, to look at local estrogen. Local estrogen, that pelvic area, the whole area that is involved both in terms of our urinary system and also our reproductive system, loves estrogen, and it really, really needs it. And as a result, when we're perimenopausal and those hormones are fluctuating, and postmenopausal when it's really fallen off a cliff, the area needs estrogen, and local estrogen can have a really, really good impact on the management of those genitourinary symptoms. And even a woman who has a history whereby, or a family history perhaps, where she cannot take HRT, she can take estrogen. It's only in a very, very small number of cases where you couldn't take local estrogen. So that's what I would advise her to do. And hopefully she would see quite a big improvement in that symptom as a result of that.
That's brilliant, Nicola. Thank you so much. Patricia, anything in nutrition and diet that could maybe help that, or?
Yeah, obviously it's the usual. If you were having UTIs at any stage, it would of course be plenty of water. Some people find that the cranberry extracts can be beneficial, but the evidence isn't that strong. So again, just to see what works there. And then it's just, I think for most women though, it's the localized estrogen that seems to do the job mostly, isn't it?
Yeah. So going to the GP first, and it'll probably be the first protocol as well. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Just what a gentleman who's on there was like, as a husband partner, is there a top 3 things that a men can do to help, men who are supporting women, wives, daughters, sisters, whatever it might be?
Well, I think, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think the fact that he's here and asking that question says lots of positive things. So my kind of 3 things would be that getting yourself educated applies equally to men as to women, so that we can be, as supportive as we can be and as understanding, having compassion for the fact that the woman genuinely can't control the emotional swings at times, and often doesn't recognize herself and finds it quite distressing that she is perhaps so anxious, so tearful, so rage-filled, so irritable. She won't necessarily recognize herself in those behaviors, but they will be happening often out of her control. And the third thing, I think, would be to support her as far as possible to take the steps that she needs to take to engage in that radical self-care. So optimizing nutrition, optimizing sleep. I mean, he might be better off at times sleeping in another bed because he'll get some sleep, and she might not be so bothered then about disturbing him, or might not be so upset by that. Encouraging her in terms of the social contacts and talking to other women and seeking help. So I would think that those are the 3 things that really are supportive.
Perfect. Noel, have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I think have a lot of patience is really important, just patience. And I think what's really important is to ask, don't be afraid to ask. And just not ask her, oh, she's all right, or are you going through anything? Just to ask what you can do to help her. And I think it's the language that's used around that is really important. And sometimes it's just the way you ask things, we say things. So I would really suggest asking her what you can do to support her. And I think that would make a huge difference, and then take the lead from her.
Thank you so much, Joelle. And just another question here, is there anything that can be done about restless legs? You know, would increased exercise, relaxation supplements, anything like that help? Because I know that's quite a common symptom as well for many women, restless legs.
Magnesium can help. Yeah, magnesium can help with sleep. Yeah, and can help with sleep and this. Yeah, I mean, I could talk to your. I mean, the first protocol is always your primary care physician to talk to your GP, but you can also go into health shops just to have a chat with them. They're usually very informed, or your pharmacist, to look at what magnesium supplement. Because if you're celiac, I think there's a different one. You know, you just need to have a chat. But magnesium can really help with that. Is there anything else, Trish, you'd think?
Yeah, like that magnesium, we don't tend to be too deficient in it, but because if somebody is anxious or they're kind of stressed and things like that, your magnesium levels can become really depleted. So it is something for a lot of women at that stage. It could be something that could help with restless legs. So I would again try to really encourage it coming from fruit and veg and cereals and nuts, because it has so many other brilliant things in there and really beneficial. But the supplements can be quite useful as well, but the evidence just isn't as strong sometimes for them. So yeah, a wide varied diet can be useful there too. Yeah.
And just you know, another question there, you know, about like, has there been much research done? And I'm going to put it to you, Tricia, because you did that, you know, that you studied there on the change in roles of women and the impact on menopause. And I know that you did mention, you know, about the, you know, the varied demands that can be in women around that time. Like there might be children demands, there might be parents that they may be taking care of, they may put, you know, other issues going on in their lives. So has there been much research done on that?
There's been just increasing research. Nicola probably knows a good bit about this as well, but we do see around this time that women should be going into leadership roles. They should be kind of coming into the prime of their lives at work, and it's not happening. And it's a combination of lots of things going on, but a lot of it is, you know, as well, because of menopause, other things that are happening in their lives, lack of confidence, all of those symptoms and not really knowing why they're happening. You probably think you're going mad or you're not going to be able to do the job. So we need workplace policies in place to support women through this, and it needs to be recognised, and people need to step up to support women at this time.
Yeah, and I did know that the government apparently is working on a workplace policy, menopause workplace policy. Now, there isn't any time in, but when that'll be out or anything like that. But as I said before, I know that the Women's Health Task Force is working on other issues as well, and some things are coming from there. But there's one question about like one person just has one symptom and is wondering whether they're peri or men, whatever. So the best way to figure that out is that to go to your GP to figure out whether you are in peri or menopause or whatever you might be.
I think the symptoms can be so insidious, you know. Often we don't see this, we don't recognize it as perimenopause until we get a hot flush or something really kind of, oh, right, now I know what it is. Whereas previously, anything from, you know, like loss of confidence, low mood, itchy skin, you know, thinning hair, there's such a variety of symptoms that we might miss as being part of perimenopause. It's can be difficult to identify them, and sometimes when you go to the GP and you're presenting with one symptom, they may not say it's perimenopause either. And they may suggest, if you have bloods done, the bloods don't always show if, you know, the hormones being outside the normal range, because as Dr. Hebe mentioned earlier, there's a real fluctuation in hormones. So your hormones are actually going up and down, and they can still remain in the normal range until such time as they then disappear. Well, not disappear entirely, but really do fall, and that's when you get to menopause. So even blood tests don't necessarily clearly define, yes, you are in perimenopause. So I would go in, I mean, I have a symptom checker on my own website, menopausemaze.ie, and that has a whole list of symptoms that you could look at completing, and it also looks at whether they've been, you know, mild or moderate or severe. And if you went in with that sort of evidence to your primary care practice, then that might help you in defining, yes, this is likely to be perimenopause. It's highly likely if you're in your late 30s, early 40s that you're perimenopausal.
Okay, thank you. And the incontinence question, which I know is a very common one as well for a lot of women for a lot of different reasons, but particularly around peri and menopause as well. So what can women do to support themselves with that?
you're back to the local estrogen, and also try to source a physiotherapist with a specialist in female health, pelvic floor health. And I can't remember the website exactly, but it's the Irish Chartered Physiotherapy Society website, and they will have a list of physiotherapists who have that expertise. You do need to source a woman with it, or a physio with a particular expertise in it. And the local estrogen application might make a huge difference again.
Yes, okay, brilliant. The mental health aspects of it then as well, you know, that, you know, we were speaking earlier about, you know, it can affect women's self-esteem and their confidence levels and stuff like that, you know. So, you know, what are things that we can do to support ourselves, and, you know, and going through that. And then as well, for me as well, it was like, I don't know what was happening, as you mentioned before, you know. So it was like that, what is going on, you know? And then, you know, that would affect whether I felt social, I suppose, you know, whether I actually wanted to go out and interact with other people. So even Noelle, did you experience anything like that?
Yeah, I when I look back now, I did disconnect a lot as well from people, and I wasn't going, like, I would have been a very social person, and I had stopped that a lot. But I suppose for me was the main thing is accepting it first of all, and then, like, I suppose back then we wasn't these discussions around it. So like you had said earlier, put a name on things, you know, very hard to name things. You know, I still doubted that I'd gone through it even 2 years ago, and you know, so even that factor. But I think even like what Nicola was saying is having a plan in place. And if I knew now, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have tried to have a plan in place before, you know, because then you're taking control back, because a lot of it is about losing control. You're losing control of your body, you're losing control of what's going on in the body, and it can be fearful. So I think if you can get some control back of that, that will help you mentally, because it will connect with the brain mentally, and having a plan in place. And like both ladies were saying, is trying the different things then, because, you know, you don't know what's going to work for you until you try them. So don't be afraid to try new things and try the different things to work, because something will work and something will help. It's just, you know, push yourself to try new things, I think, and find what works best for you and go with that.
Yeah.
Because then you're back in control. Yeah.
And there's just a question there. Thank you so much, Noelle. And I would agree with that, because and I think, and I'm not sure whether it was Nicola or Patricia told me, because I was like saying, you know, I definitely wanted the symptoms of menopause is that I just don't care what people think anymore. And it was Patricia when I told, that's because this hormone is going down, and that's why. And I'm like, I'm not 100% sure that's the only reason why.
I agree.
You know, that I'm starting to, a bit, definitely a bit of an angry old woman going on sometimes. But, but there is like, the hormones really do affect a lot of our mental health as well, don't they? In those, in terms of not wanting to be around people.
Yeah, estrogen is our pro-social hormone. It has a use in terms of keeping the race going. We need to be social in order to click with someone and, conceive more humans. So it's our pro-social hormone, and when it falls, we don't feel the same need to be as social, maybe. We don't necessarily feel as care as much about that. However, we need to push ourselves to maintain the social contacts. And I think women get a lot of support, of course, from our, if we have a male partner, we of course get it from our male partners, but there's something about a female energy and the women's group. So, together talking openly about these experiences, and so that we can see it's not just me. I'm not the only one that feels like I'm losing my mind. And that is literally how I would have felt. I would have said to my husband, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I bring to the table. I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
And that's the hormones. That is the fact that my hormones were just going off on their own journey without discussing it with me first.
And Nicola, actually on that as well, I think it also brings in that whole fear factor. So you actually do retreat because it's just that protective shell, and then that exacerbates a lot of issues. So I think it's recognizing what's happening and trying to really push yourself to get out there too. It's really important.
Oh, brilliant, Trish. And just a couple of questions come in. The localized estrogen, that's in our private, that goes into our private area, isn't it? Yeah, it's not a patch.
No, it has to be prescribed.
Yeah,
it has to be prescribed.
Words I could say, because we're on Facebook Live as well. So in terms of, because I know there's different rules around different things. But yeah, and a doctor would explain that
Yes.
to us as well.
Yeah.
What would happen, like, if someone went on HRT and then came off HRT? What would happen to the symptoms?
You don't, you don't have to come off HRT. Historically, people would have been, well, I mean, the Women's Health Initiative study in the early 2000s really screwed up HRT for women and meant that a whole lot of women came off it and a whole lot of women were terrified of it. And that was 2001, and that's still the case today. You will hear women say, I can't have HRT, I couldn't go on that because it causes breast cancer, all because of that flawed study in 2001. So HRT really does have a role to play. And overall, if you look at all the science that's available, and there's a lot of science available now, if you look at all of that, overall, there are more benefits from HRT than there are negatives. And if you go on to HRT, if you're prescribed it from your, within 10 years of being menopausal, so that, remember that day that you're menopausal, within 10 years of that, if you are prescribed HRT, then there are less risks to you than if you were prescribed later on. But even later on, you can be prescribed it under proper consultation, weighing up the risks and benefits. I mean, we should seek to be treated as competent individuals, where we can make our own risk assessment with information, of course, from the professionals, but make our own assessment as to what is of benefit to us. And certainly HRT has an absolutely huge role in replacing, to some degree, the hormones that we have lost, and we don't get those hormones back again. So things like osteoporosis, heart disease, deteriorating brain health, diabetes are all directly linked with the absence of estrogen and testosterone and progesterone in terms of affecting our mood. So we should really get ourselves informed about HRT and speak to our GP about, especially if the GP isn't as informed, then maybe go look for another GP to get advice and look at patch or oral or creams, and consider testosterone as well. Don't leave that out of the picture either, because that has a really big impact on our health.
Two things that occurred to me there is that I think when we were having our discussion, we were preparing for this, that someone had said, which I actually took on board, was that when they go to their GP surgery, they go to see the visiting GP.
Yeah.
Was it you said that, Nicola? And I thought that was a really good tip, because they don't know anything about you. They have to read up everything. They're getting information new. So, you're more likely to get, maybe a bit more in depth of a consultation than with your GP who's known you for however number of years or whatever. Not to put down all GPs, because obviously there are some very good GPs out there, but even Patricia, you said that 10% of women, don't talk to anybody at all about it. The lack of knowledge, like 70-something% of women got their information from social media. And social media can be great, but it can also be really, really harmful. So that's really, really scary statistics. So having these conversations, we said, can be really, we hope will be beneficial and give women information. And we're contributing. There's loads of other events coming out throughout this week, so women look out for them, men look out for them. There'll be more information, broadening our knowledge base around it all. I have a personal question myself. So if somebody goes on HRT, can they still follow a estrogen-rich diet? Like, one won't clash with the other necessarily, Patricia, with it?
No, and the plant estrogens, they are plant estrogens, and they're really weak, and they can be beneficial to alleviate some of the symptoms of hot flushes and things like that, but they can take time to have an impact, and they definitely don't work for every woman. It's actually, again, to do with the bacteria in your gut. Some people have a certain bacteria down there that makes them actually work stronger, and a lot of us don't have that. But no, there's going to be really probably no impact there at all.
Okay, great. Perfect. Listen, we're going to try and answer other questions in the email. We're going to send out resources to all the attendees today. I just want to ask each of you one question then, if you wouldn't mind, and it's a bit of a personal one, but you talked about radical self-care, Nicola. So what's your one radical self-care tip that you do for yourself?
Oh, yoga. Holy moly. Yeah, yoga is fundamental to me. Well, I'm going to add yoga, I'm going to add walking to that too, both actually. Yeah. That's, I think it's about just saying, do you know what? I deserve this time. That might sound really silly, but actually to make a conscious decision that I am going to include this time for myself in my week. And it gets the same priority as anything else would.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. Patricia, what about yourself?
Yeah, I was the exact same. A really good walk somewhere, just being out in nature. And to be fair, actually, after this, I'll be going downstairs to play football with the puppy. That will also get me out of my head.
Yeah.
The puppy Penny, how cute. I mean, we should have actually invited Penny as well, because I think that would have been lovely. It would take too long to bring her up and downstairs. Next time, Tricia. No, thank you very much. And Noelle, you spoke there a little bit about what is your number one go-to for your self-care?
I'll be honest, like, you know, sometimes you don't feel like doing things, but I make sure I do them every day. And that's the thing. Even it's the days you don't feel like doing them, they're the days they'll work the most. So my gratitude, I have 2 journals on my table, and I leave them specifically on my table, so I have to do them because I look at them all the time and I'm like, but one is my gratitude, that I write 3 things I'm grateful for each day, and the other one is just a journal of thoughts, feelings, just sometimes when you get things out, and if you find it, maybe you happen someone around you that you can talk to, and that, but writing in a book is really good, and getting out for a good walk can't beat it, and being mindful doing it is really important, I think.
Yeah.
And the one thing I always say to myself every day, which is my own mantra, is I can only do what I can do. And if that grounds me every day, I say that to myself. And if I'm starting to get a little bit hot under the collar or something, I just say, look, you can only do what you can do, and that's okay. And it just kind of brings me back then.
And brings in that lovely self-compassion that we all need as well, that we're only trying, anyone is only doing the best they can on any given day with what they've got on that day. Like what I had yesterday versus what I have today could be 2 different days. And so, yeah, I really love that self-compassion thing as well. I started strength training 2 years ago in a gym. And I find that whatever about anything else, because I mean, it's not about muscles or, or anything else, whatever, but I find for my head, it actually gives me, and even though being nervous about today, and I had a gym session this morning, just lifting those weights just really, really got rid of all that excess nervous energy. And I find it really, really helps my head as well as my physical, it just has an overall thing. So with the exercise, if we depends on what people can do within wherever they are, as much as they can do. So I think exercise between all of us, we've said, is really beneficial. So thank you very much, and Nicola, Patricia, and Noelle. We've really, really loved having you here. I mean, I could just talk for hours to you about the subject. I've learned so much preparing for this. I hope all our attendees today have learned a lot as well from you. I know I have. And thank you so much, everybody. For all our attendees, we will be sending out a copy of the recording, and also the resources, and also links to the different websites and different things that we spoke about. And I would encourage you there, to attend other events that are happening later on this week online as well, so you can access them from the comfort of your home, your car, wherever you are. So that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along, and we will see you all, we hope, at a next session. We'll let you all going on. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you again soon.